This episode is brought to you by Affordable Drill Towers. Founded in 2016 by our good friend Steve Sanguidoce, a retired Houston, Texas firefighter, the Affordable Drill Tower was designed and built with functionality and versatility in mind for any training ground. As a standalone training tower and add-on to an existing burn building or Connex setup, the Affordable Drill Tower packs a massive punch at an affordable price tag. With over 50 towers across the country, from Massachusetts to California, Montana to Texas, professionally engineered, NFPA and ISO compliant, the Affordable Drill Towers brings the versatility to your training ground. From Main Street USA, the small town fire company in their back parking lot, to the training grounds of the largest metropolitan fire academy, the Affordable Drill Tower fits the bill for price and functionality. Check them out at affordabledrilltowers.com. And two things I like to talk about also when talking about our friends over at Affordable Drill Towers. One, their customized training program. They have the ability to bring some of the best talent from across the country to your home turf after the install of the Affordable Drill Tower. Designing a customized training program for you and your department, Steve will facilitate some of the biggest and brightest names of the American Fire Service to come in and work with you and your department. And secondly, and I think most important, is Steve's belief in need over greed. The Affordable Drill Tower company gives back to not-for-profits that support organizations in the American Fire Service. Organizations such as the Joey D Foundation, which is near and dear to Steve Sanguidoce's heart, as well as many other not-for-profits that he takes a part of. He takes great pride in providing funding for organizations that push this job forward. So check him out, Steve and Dennis over at Affordable Drill Towers. Send them an email at info@affordabledrilltowers.com. Check them out on social media, and their YouTube page is kicking butt with great information, training nuggets, and information about their towers. So check them out, Affordable Drill Towers, and let them know Jeremy over at National Fire Radio sent you. This episode's brought to you by Ridgeway Leatherworks. Ridgeway Leatherworks is a firefighter-owned and operated business, as well as a family-run business, and that's what I love about it. Rob and his family are passionate about their customer service and the quality product and craftsmanship they put out for the emergency services. Rob's been on the show. We've been to his business. We've seen them in action. I've even tried to hand paint radio straps. I promise you, it is not as easy as what the final outcome looks like. The product is so good. It's so clean and crisp. And yet, man, it takes that steady hand. Rob's become a near and dear friend of our podcast, and you hear that over and over when we talk about our sponsors, that they're friends, supporters, and that's what this networking community is all about, is supporting one another. Ridgeway Leatherworks, Rob Meyer, crushing it. Quality and craftsmanship is number one. Customer service is right there with it. From custom radio straps, universal radio holsters, chin straps, flashlight holders, anti-sway straps, and locker tags made out of leather, there's plenty of opportunity along the way when you deal with Ridgeway Leatherworks. So check them out at ridgewayleatherworks.com. Find them on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And tell Rob you heard about him on the National Fire Radio platform, and give him a little plug. And tell him, keep up the good work. We need to support our firefighter-owned businesses, and especially family-run businesses, where his two daughters and his wife help out day in and day out along with his other employees. So again, Ridgeway Leatherworks, check him out at ridgewayleatherworks.com and find him on all your social media channels. Hey everybody, Jeremy, National Fire Radio. Today's podcast is a special treat for me. The gentleman on the other line right now, the guy holding here, listening to this intro, is somebody that actually is super important to me. He doesn't even know that, but he is. And I'll tell you why. This gentleman, he's a captain with CAL FIRE in the Napa Valley region of California. 21 years in the fire service, 20 years with CAL FIRE. Captain Kamron Gangbin. Kamron, thanks for joining me, pal.
Oh, thanks, Jeremy. It's my pleasure, man. What an honor.
I'm going to stroll into this conversation now, why I opened with that phrase that you're important to me. Early on in National Fire Radio, I didn't really have a good grasp of how widespread our platform could or potentially can be. And Terry and I, my wife and I, were in Napa Valley traveling, enjoying the beautiful scenery. And if you've never been to Napa Valley, you need to be there at least once. It is Probably one of the more beautiful places I've been to. Absolutely gorgeous. And my wife and I were there for a couple days on a longer trip in California. And National Fire Radio was pretty new at the time. I would say maybe a year in. And we passed a firehouse up in the Napa Valley, in the valley up there, and it's pretty isolated. And the firehouse is wide open. And I want to talk about this, Kamron, because it's so cool how the firehouses literally are just open-aired firehouses, which is so unique to me. And I pull in, I snap a quick picture from the apron, and we leave. And I post it on social media. And later that day, I get a message like, hey, man, we follow you guys. Come back if you're still in the area. And we did. I think the next day or later that day, we came back. And I think you guys had just gotten back from a fire or a run or something. And it was great. I mean, you guys opened your doors to my wife and I, and you showed us around, and we chatted and conversed. And it was just a special moment for me because I'm on the other end of our country, from New Jersey to California, and here is a brother opening the doors to me and my wife. I am forever grateful, man, because that interaction we had where we first met was powerful to me, and it really explained to me the importance of the platform and what we were doing. And for you to just openly invite us over and to introduce yourself to us, and just opened your world up to us. It was a moment that I will never forget, and I appreciate you, man. Thank you for that.
Man, that was thank you. Wow, thank you, Jeremy, and thank you to your wife, Terry. Man, she is a real saint, man. I remember that. I saw you said heading west side or something like that. I'm like, man, I hope he comes to our area, And then I saw you shot picture of our station in Vallejo. I was like, man, stop in. I thought that was really cool. And
Yeah.
I remember the fellas were all pumped, like, hey man, Jeremy from National Fire Radio is gonna probably stop by. And
which is the silliest thing, man. When people say that, I get weird. I get uncomfortable with that because listen, man, I'm just a meathead, right? I think what the best part about National Fire Radio was just formalizing buffing. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. I just travel the country now, and we've gotten to the point where a lot of people know who we are on the platform. So it's literally just formalizing the ability to go buff in any city or town in the country. It's amazing. It truly is.
For me, it was my first outlet of podcasting, getting outside of my bubble, though, and listening to people from other areas saying stuff that I hadn't heard before. So at the first time you hear it's a little uncomfortable, and then you kind of dive in to see what they're talking about, and you learn their culture. Oh, that makes sense. So you were kind of the platform for me to kind of get outside my culture, my area, my influence, and kind of look outside the door. And so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, that's cool. And I appreciate that because it makes me feel like we're on the right path then and we're doing the right thing here, And I remember after we got the chat for a little bit and then my wife and I left, I secretly said over to you, hey man, if any work comes in, you let me know because I'm in the area for the next 2 nights. And I go, shoot me a text if anything comes in because I'd love to see operations in California. And at the time, you guys were just coming off some really tough fires. When we say fires, I mean consuming part of the Napa Valley region. I mean, we're talking large wildfires.
Yeah. Yeah, and even that to say that those areas, a lot of those areas that you stayed in, and then those wineries that you visited,
yeah,
and a lot of those communities that you drove through, they're gone.
I know they are. I've heard. God,
they're yeah. It's I mean, if you're from another part of the country other than California, it's really common that a lot of departments will separate their their structural response and then their kind of forestry response or wildland. In California, we play both. There's no separation, whether you go to a structure fire, a medical aid, or a large wildland fire. Everybody in California is set up to do that. We're not separate, and so yeah. So we call it WUI, the Wild Urban Interface, Wildland Urban Interface.
Right.
And so we could, most of our calls are medical in nature, but a large volume of our fire is wildland with a structure component. A lot of people will talk about forest fires and forests, and we have those areas in California, but my experience is having fires in communities like suburban sprawl, areas like that. Like it's not uncommon for me to turn the corner and see 20 to 50 houses on fire with people sleeping in them, not knowing that their house is on fire.
And not only that, but then take it a couple steps further. You're talking more isolated communities typically, right? And so,
Yeah,
you know, you're not pulling into the block with 4 engines, 2 trucks, a rescue company, and everything else. I mean, you guys are rolling in with what, a 4-man engine?
yeah. I happen to work at a big house, and
Okay.
we have a 3-engine company house, so we run 3 engines out of our house, and but still, and each one has 3, sometimes 4 guys on it.
Right.
But even that, when you're up against something so
Yeah.
significant like that, like that's you're just you're still just a one-person engine company, kind of operating in a block of origin or community of origin fire.
And I find this conversation very interesting because it's so foreign to me. Like I couldn't comprehend that type of volume of fire on arrival where you're talking neighborhoods are on fire. And I guess it should be said, and just to parallel what you were saying is you guys are municipal firefighters, but you're also trained to do wildland urban interface, right? And so you guys do all disciplines. And so you could go very easily from, I think when I was there, there was a wildfire, only a couple acres that you hit me up. You sent me a text just to get back to what we were saying. You sent me a text, and my wife and I actually took a drive, and the smoke was blowing into the valley, and people were terrified because they just had lived through some of those fires that you were talking about. And people were walking out of the wineries and things like that, and there was smoke in the air. I mean, it was irritating. That's how heavy it was blowing through the valley at that time from a smaller fire. And you could see the panic on people's faces because of what they've dealt with. And for you guys to be able to be first in on something like that, you never know how the cards are going to be dealt, right? I mean, these are communities that you live in, right? So, I
Yeah,
mean, your family's there, your relatives, your friends, your kids' schools, right? I mean, these are
yeah.
communities that you guys are entrusted in trying to protect life and property in. And typically, when it comes to a larger scale incident like that, the cards are so stacked against you from the get, no?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 5th generation Napa Valley, so when I go to a call, I mean, my mom lives left, my dad lives
Yeah.
right. The hospital I was born in is across the street from me. It's really uncommon for me to go to a call and not it be someone that I know. There's a lot of negative that could go with that, but the positive of that is overwhelming, like being a part of my community. But then also the downfall is that it's super personal when you got a block of fire or a house that you're familiar with, and you're rescuing folks that you know,
Yeah.
or but it's also neat in that common moment. I'll tell you what, some of the most awkward conversations to have with somebody is breaking into their house in the middle of the night, 1 o'clock in the morning. They're dead asleep, and you're shaking them, saying, "Hey, your house is on fire." Like a lot of people, think about like someone waking you up in your bed. Like
Yeah.
the first, like I grab my gun, whatever. Like
Sure. Sure.
so, those conversations have to happen over and over and over throughout the night, and sometimes days. Like these are, a lot of times when these fast-moving fires are hitting these communities, people have no idea. They move at a speed that you can't drive to outpace them.
Right.
They're moving at a speed. So when you show up and you got a house that's somewhat involved, heavily involved, mostly involved, like we still have to look at it like with an optimism of like where can I search and find these people? Because I can't really get too deep into some of the stories, but like we've found people in the strangest places under the worst conditions, and like if there's still a chance to save them, like we're gonna push that. And there's a couple other little different things, like in a normal structure fire, like say you're searching searchable space and you make a grab, like usually by the time you get them out front to the yard and to the ambulance, it's kind of like when you start to stabilize the incident. Well, when you pull someone from a burning house in the wooey or the wildland, like you may be pulling them out into another environment that was worse than the one they were in.
Yeah.
So like you pull them from a burning building, and then there's no ambulance. Like you got to stuff them in the engine. You got to drive them down a road that's blocked. Maybe down to the nearest hospital. And so there's a lot more than just. It's hard to kind of wrap your head around, like for those who just respond to maybe just a house fire alone. Like when you have multiple houses and communities on fires, like they're not. It's not just the grab from the house. It's like, well, how do you get them to like medical care at a hospital.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
there's many layers to it.
I'm just trying to wrap my brain around it right now as you say it, right? And it's like you don't the logistics of it all, meaning, yeah, you're right, man. We push a line in, we knock the fire down, we make a grab, or we search the building, and typically the incident starts to stabilize, right? Once we get water on that fire, for me, typically the incident starts to stabilize. You're right. For you guys, my God, like, and not only that, but so as a captain, you're a captain of an engine company, or are you in charge of the whole house? How does that work?
Both. So when I'm on duty, I got 3 engine there. I'm the captain on duty. So
Okay.
our rank structure goes firefighter, engineer, and then captain. And then our engineers are supervisors. So it's really common for like, I'll be a captain on one of the engines, and then might have engineers on the other 2 engines
Okay.
as the company officers.
So kind of where I'm going with that then, right? It sounds like you guys run as a package for the most part then, right? Especially on a fire or something, right? You guys are running out all together, right?
Yes.
The interesting thing then is for you as like the company boss, right, of that firehouse with 3, I mean, you got your people to worry about too. And not that we don't for, anywhere else in the country, but this is, I mean, if you roll up and you have multiple homes on fire with all the foliage, vehicles, outbuildings, you name it. I mean, you're talking fire. Your people you guys are scattering, right? Because there's a lot of work that has to be done, and the cards are stacked against you, right? So
yeah, and that's where I really got to give like a lot of kudos to my agency. Cal Fire, as large as it is, they train their folks like no other.
yeah,
Our entry level training for this stuff is state of the art. It's repetitive. It's consistent. So, we start with a really solid foundation through our basic training, but then where the rubber really hits the road is the mentoring that goes on at the station. And the responsibility of our, backseat firefighter, tailboard firefighter, whatever is from my experiences is usually much greater than most. Like the responsibility of that front seat firefighter, because a lot of times on the rig, there's an engineer driving, the operator's driving, the company officer's driving, and the firefighter is riding what would be the captain's seat.
Oh, okay.
So you have you have a firefighter doing a lot of the navigation and radio communications and stuff, and organizing resources for the company officer if they're first at scene. So like the view of of our first year firefighter has to be kind of zoomed out, really big picture, a lot of responsibility. And with that goes a lot of organizational training.
Wow.
Cal Fire has done just a wonderful job in organizing the WUI, the Wildland Urban Interface. We call it a menu, but we actually have like kind of an organization of how we approach houses in the WUI, like how we triage houses. We have an acronym called SFACS, and how we triage a house, whether it's a threatened defensible, threatened non-defensible, and then we have like 7 tactical strategies that we could pick from.
Okay.
Number one being probably the most important is check and go, and that's like the life safety. Is say you get to a house and you punch up the driveway, and it's mostly heavily involved, whatever. We default to check and go, which means we're checking for life and then we're moving on.
Yeah.
This is, I only got 500 gallons of water.
Yeah.
And this is
right.
a very large house, and so it's like really using the water to protect the search, and then possibly just moving on because you just don't have enough to put out that volume of fire.
Check and go.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I mean, and to throw kudos to your department that, I mean, there's so many layers here, right? I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, because I'm also thinking too, you just said punch it up the driveway. This is rural communities. I mean, I know Napa downtown is pavement, 4-lane road down the middle, goes to 2-lane roads. And yeah, there's paved surface roads and, organized neighborhoods. But then you're talking about the hill country, right? Like the up out of the valley, right? And you're talking about large ranch style homes and compounds, and right? I mean, it's just
and wineries and large rural, the rural urban interface. So we kind of categorize it as interface and intermix. And like the difference between an interface is where, like, say you go to San Diego, or you have like a suburban neighborhood, like on one side is just all houses, then you have a street, and on the other side's like all forest. That would be that would be an interface where there's a clear demarcation line of
Got it.
residence and then woodland. But intermix is kind of the area that you saw where there's just kind of sporadic houses
Yeah.
up in the wood, up in the hill. So our fires move from both. Like some of our major losses have been in the downtown city of Santa Rosa. Like
Right.
that is, you know, Coffee Park. I mean, most people up until it burned, it was like, wow, we never thought we were even that threat. But no, it jumped the 101 freeway and took off, burnt down large commercial districts, fucking Kmart's and restaurants and
Wild.
you know, thousands of homes and like out in the middle of in an urban environment. You know, so that you're not, just because you're not in the hills doesn't mean you're untouchable here in California. Like
Yeah. Yeah, and I just have to believe, as an outsider that's never experienced something like this, I mean, you mentioned it before, but the speed in which this consumes. I mean, it is, you know, the check and go makes sense, right? I mean, you have limited resources and the fire is just stacked against you. I mean, at some point, it's not manageable. It's not savable. And so, you know, then it becomes what? Life safety priority. And then, you know, and you're writing off properties as you go because it's the only way to get ahead, no?
Yeah, and that was kind of the hardest thing as these major fires started, like, you know, in the last 7 years when we started seeing them, is that we're so used to taking action, like, you know, putting hose in the ground, knocking the fire,
Yeah.
you know, doubling down your efforts. And then that was kind of the hardest shift for us to actually go to. It's like, hey, it's, you know, and it's not that, you know, yeah, it's like the faster you can move and search the house, the faster you could punch up the next driveway and search that house. And the faster you search that house, you could get to the next one. So the quicker you are, the quicker you can move on, which means like no fire suppression, which would be a loss at that. You're not going to be, you know, we wouldn't have enough water to make an impact.
Right.
So if you could get in and get the search done and then move on and get the search done and move on and get the search done, you know, throughout an hour, you could clear a neighborhood, a road, and just get like a primary search on, like, that's kind of strange to say, like a primary search on a road, like, or a community, you know, that's kind of what we're going for. And that's check and go. And so there's some parameters in the check and go that we kind of default to. So it says like, if we do our SFACs, but check and go is if there's no TRA, which is a temporary refuge area,
Okay.
or a safety zone, we can only check it and go. To actually stay and defend, it has to meet a couple criteria that we use the SFACs acronym for, and it has to have, you know, it's got to have TRAs and safety zones and escape routes and stuff like that. So, you know, for us able to stay and defend, like the homeowner would have to do some type of preparation on their own to make it defendable.
Yes. Makes sense. How important is it to get out into these communities and learn them?
Oh man, you know, I think that a lot of our, you know, it's really easy to look at our losses, but our station, I really count our successes, and I could say a lot of that had to do to local orientation.
I would
Like
have to. I have to think so.
Well, one of the nights of one of these fires, you know, we punched through a road that it was zero viz. It was high heat, zero viz. It was embers were getting sucked into the engine. I mean, I had a kind of a new firefighter in the back screaming, "Holy!" You know, just terrified. And I was in the captain's seat, convincing my driver, like, "You will be fine. Just keep going. I know this road. I learned to drive on it." We were punching through to get one of our firefighters' mom. You know, that his house was on fire. And so we were punching through it, and I always lead that back to, like, you know, if I didn't know that road, or say we were from out of the area, nobody would have came in here and cleared this road. We were able to clear and get so many. I think we searched 7 or 8 houses on that road and got people out just to turn back around and punch back through it and see those houses gone.
Wow.
Like, you know, we were able to wake these folks up, get them going, get them on the road, get, you know, maybe their pets, and get them down the road to turn back around 15 minutes later and to see that, like, they would have had zero chance, you know. And it's like, if we hadn't punched down that road, if I hadn't known that road, I was giving my driver turn by turn direct. Okay, the road's going to go to the left. Okay, slow down, it's going to go to the right. And he's driving and he's trusting me. And it's like, if we and as we come out, and I'll shoot you this video, as we come out of this fire, you can see all the resources from out of the area staging, like turning around. They're not going to punch in. And now, you know, so it's like they didn't have local knowledge, and it's kind of it's frightening when you don't know what's on the other side of that fire, you know, like
Well,
you can find yourself in a bad spot.
Well, that's it, right? I mean, and so I could only imagine, and I can only imagine their faces when you guys come punching out of it, right? And everybody else is like, "Holy crap, where are they coming from?" You know?
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully, I didn't see the look on my firefighter in the back.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that guy's like, "I'm done." Yeah, right. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But that is, and so just take that to my world, how important it is to get out of the firehouse and into the community and learn those back alleys, those setbacks, those challenging water issues, like all that stuff is so important when it becomes game time. And I can only imagine for you guys with the complexity of your response area that it's just imperative to really know and understand the community as best as possible.
Yeah, those water sources are key. What I found myself in the middle of the city of Santa Rosa, you know, a highly dense populated area. And I went to go, you know, the Kmart started on fire, small fire, you know, so I hooked to the hydrant and like, hey, let's just hit it with a deck gun. Like, we'll just make a quick knock of this. I hooked to the hydrant. It was a private hydrant. I spin it up, dead, nothing. Well, a couple blocks away, we were losing houses by the hundreds. So as these houses were chunking or burning away, you know, the water was spewing. It dropped the whole system. So all hydrants were out of play. So even those water sources you may think that are going to be solid, like they're not. They're not going to be there. So like having those elevated water sources, which we, you know, at the wineries, that's what they have, and those ponds and lakes and stuff, and then water trucks and water tenders, and then just being really.
This episode's brought to you by the Affordable Standpipe Prop. Let's break it down real quick. Steve and the crew at Affordable Drill Towers is doing it again. They've created this fully custom and fabricated standpipe prop to support the fire service. I'm telling you right now, this is a game-changing piece of training equipment. And I want to hop into it real quick. It is designed with a 4-inch manifold of high-strength galvanized Schedule 10 pipe. The cart and manifold are powder-coated red for a durable finish, meaning it's not just a talking piece. It's not something you tuck away on the shelf. This is a training prop that can be wheeled into the classroom and then brought out onto the training ground. And so let's talk about that. In the classroom, there's nothing better than having a hands-on prop in front of the students, in front of the fire companies that are there to learn about standpipe and FDC connections. Having that prop in the classroom allows for a great instructional lecture. And then from there, take the standpipe theory and translate it to the training grounds. You could wheel the cart out that's on casters, you wheel it out into the parking lot, and that same training prop that you just used hands-on in the classroom can now be used hands-on on the training ground by pumping into it and flowing out of it. It offers such versatility in its approach. It has a 2.5-inch Siamese connection, 7 2.5-inch outlets, 6 of which are standpipe valves, has a water motor gong, sprinkler head with a control valve, and a system pressure gauge. You can also upgrade and put 3 of the most common field-adjustable PRVs. I'm telling you right now, this is a game-changing training prop that needs to be in every fire company or training department across the country. Reach out to Steve and the crew, info@affordabledrilltowers.com. Ask for a demo, ask for information, or check them out on social media and YouTube. There's plenty of content out there that shows you exactly what the affordable standpipe prop can do for you. This episode's brought to you by Taylor's Tins. Taylor and his crew at Taylor's Tins have been manufacturing aluminum helmet fronts since 2017. With over 200,000 tins in the market, they are a leader in the helmet front space. Custom design, one-offs to department orders, they can turn them around within 24 to 48 hours. Customer service is what they pride themselves on, and they provide nothing but top-shelf product and service to their customers. Check them out at taylorstins.com and check out their full line of product offering. They've always been a very strong supporter since day one with the National Fire Radio podcast and platform, and Taylor and his crew have become dear friends of ours, and we appreciate the support. And at checkout, for a little extra bonus, use coupon code NFR Sent Me. That's NFR Sent Me for a discount on your order. Exclusions do apply. Anyway, check out taylorstins.com for the latest and greatest offerings from Taylor and his crew. And in the words of Taylor, stop burning up leather.
Really kind of thoughtful about what you do with your water, making your water work, like where you place it matters. So that's been a huge lesson for us.
Yeah, I don't want to lose track of that, lesson, the whole thing with the water, because I want to come back to that, because I want to talk about training with you, because I know that's super important. And I have a few notes on training quickness and as training matches reality as some of the things you're saying. So I want to get back to those. But the one thing I want to ask you, right, before we kind of segue and move on, how hard is it to deal with the defeatist kind of complexity that comes with this? Like, I know, the highs are very much the highs when you can make get people out and move them on. But man, I have to feel there's a lot of times that you guys feel defeated because you're just so outgunned and outmanned. I mean, am I accurate in that statement, or is that?
Man, I mean, you're right on the bullseye, and actually it just starts to stir a bunch of emotions because, that's kind of the one thing that I think all of us are still trying to process and talk about and stuff like that, because it's like really, it's super personal. Like if you ever, I can't do it, but if you go on YouTube and kind of listen to some of the radio traffic, it's just one after another.
Yeah.
Right. The rescues are happening at such a volume that, if you don't write down the rescue, it's going to be the last time it's announced out, because they're coming in. It's such a rapid pace. If you're not in the area, person's trapped, 1234 Main Street.
Right.
On the phone says can't make person trapped, next one's up, and it's just like this firing off. And if like you just try to catch streets that are in your area, addresses, and you write them down.
Yeah.
There's no check back. There's no confirmation to say that like, is someone going to this? The volume of 911 calls, it's so overwhelming and it's so defeating. Like when like, when you're in the area and you're hearing someone needing rescue, and you just know that there's no physical way to punch through what is in front of them. And it's heartbreaking, it's personal. Into the same fact, back to like knowing your area, I think that's one of the wins that I got to search some houses I grew up in, like searching a floor plan and no viz. Like, it was really comforting and nice to like, to go into these homes that I knew from childhood and just be able to search them with a confidence that like I didn't miss a spot.
Yes.
And so like when you're talking about the defeat, like it's really easy to focus on that defeat, but like what we try to do is really capture our wins. And so sometimes you just got to say them out loud, even the little ones. And then I remember, and a couple things I've done too is like call people from out of the area. I got this homie hookup. I don't know if you know him. He's Gary Lane out of Canton, Ohio. And
I do not.
He does a lot of teaching around the country with a bunch of different cadres, but he's a tailboard fireman. He's got, tons of years on the job, but what he does is that, he's really easy to talk to. And sometimes I call him up sometimes, but hey man, like my crew and I, we're beat up right now. Like it's really hard to get focused on the mission. Like, what do you got?
Yeah.
And then he'll send me some calls or something, some experiences. And then he'll like really put back and focus like why we do what we do, because no matter what, you want to talk to any firefighter, engineer, captain, battalion chief, division chief, you always rope it back into like why we do what we do. Like, why did you sign up? That's something we could all relate to. No matter how much you get detached, you tie it back into why we signed up and what the mission is. Like it puts that focus back on them and less on me. And I don't know, man, Gary has a great way of roping me in sometimes.
Awesome.
And I appreciate that.
Well, I think a couple things with this, right, is one for you. You said capture our wins. I think that's super important, right? Because, understanding the mentality that, we're dealt a tough hand and, there's nothing you can do to get past it other than do your very best. And so capturing those wins and counting them and memorizing them to share with your crews is that maybe that little uplift, but also the importance of just having somebody you can lean on, somebody you can reach out and say, hey man, I need something, good for you. Like, I think that's, for you to share that, it's personal. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I think we all need someone, and it could be a brother from the other side of the country, or it could be a guy next door. But I think it's super important to have somebody in your life that can help you in your time of need. It's important. For sure.
Yeah. Something I heard on your podcast, like one of your early podcasts, it was you and, Nick Esposito was like one of your first truck tactics one. And I remember something he said that I took to heart. He's like, talking about mentors, like always have a mentor, below you, the same rank and above. And like that,
That's
when I
cool.
first
Yeah,
heard that, I'm like,
I
oh,
remember that.
that's great. And,
Yeah.
and I did it. And man, like if there's some advice I could give you, do that. Like having like some of my best mentors are either, I have mentors below my rank, like in the engineer and firefighter, and also at the captain. Like having those mentors below the rank, at your rank, and above that's been huge too.
That's cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's great.
Oh,
And
that
I'm
was
sure
from
Nick would
you.
love to hear that. Yeah. Well, listen, man, that just means that somebody's listening to our podcast. So I appreciate that.
Oh, that's why when you called me on, I'm like, what am I going to talk about? I'll just rehash all Jeremy's podcast.
Get out of here. Listen, man. Listen, we've been going a half hour already, and this has been incredible because it's content we don't talk about. It's not something that I'm familiar with. And that's why it's important to me with this platform is to really capture stories from all over the job. And, what you do on a daily basis is very different than what's being done, say, where I'm from in the Northeast. It's just very different. And it's all the same job, but it's very different in the same regard. So let's talk about a couple other things real quick that are passionate to you too. You mentioned mentoring. Let's talk about that for a minute. I know you stating that you listen to the podcast or what, and you've picked up nuggets here and there. I appreciate that, right? It makes me feel good to know that we're bringing something to the table to, if we can offer advice or suggestions or through the conversations with other individuals to be impactful is super important. What does that mean to you? Like mentorships are important. Do you find yourself being in a role that maybe people are starting to look at you or how you carry and conduct yourself might be starting to be construed as mentoring others, whether it's intentional or unintentional?
Yeah, and when you're saying that, I'm just thinking like I'm such the receiver of mentors, especially I call them like remote mentors. Like you're one of my remote mentors. Like I listen to your podcast, and again, like you've influenced me probably more than you have any idea. And that's the same to go with like Nick Esposito
Yeah,
and a couple all these other folks that
sure.
I listen to them, and I've been I get the most out of being remote mentored. But what that does, it gives me something to be able to pass on and mentor others. And a lot of people, I think at work or maybe if you knew me outside, they would say like, oh, Kamron, he really likes training. Like he's a good instructor or something like that. And like, that's not my passion at all. Like it may look like, it's training or an instructor. Like if someone tells me to be an instructor, it's not that I say no, but I don't really want to do it. Like I'm not in it to be an instructor, but I will do it to mentor. Like I understand like making that connection with a new firefighter, like kind of giving them the roadmap and what that means. And usually I could do it because I've made the mistake. And so I, I don't think I've really forgot where I came from. So
It's good.
when I get a new firefighter, I kind of, I mean, I can't exactly relate to him still, but I kind of know what connections to make his job, like where to focus on, and
Well,
like through mentoring.
there's some commonality there, right? And the commonality is the job. It's the training aspect, right? You might have moved on in your career with other responsibilities and other focus, but you still hold the commonality of training for the betterment of your company and of your department.
Yeah, and like the best compliment, because I have a high turnover. We have such a volume of employees, like we just have high turnover. It's not uncommon to move rank every 4 years. Like that's kind of like your tailboard 4 years, boom, company officer 4 years, boom, captain,
Hmm.
you know, battalion chief, division
And
chief, staff chief.
that's like department wide.
Yeah, we're
Wow.
we're
Okay.
so large. We are so
I
large
know.
that we
Yeah.
have more jobs than people. So there are avenues to where like if you want you could get to the top real fast. Like it's
Hmm.
just you don't have to spend a lot of time in grade. So a lot of times people are like, well, that's not good. Well, there's also those jobs for those guys who want to be in grade. Like myself, I usually stay in grade 10 years, and I found that to be really helpful.
Yeah,
I
for
like the
sure.
guts.
Yeah.
But mentoring, like I get like you're talking about. Like, well, how do I know that I could trust this firefighter when it goes down in these environments? Well, it's because I've invested in them, and we've already.
Yes.
What I did is I took his basic training and then like doubled down on the foundation. I built some rhythm and tempo. I built some slides that like, hey, this is our plan A harder, plan B, and plan C. So like he knows they know like what my next move is. Like I'm an open book. I tell them, we go through it like all the time. Like, hey, this is plan A, you know? So I love having a constant and then add variables. But if we're just, everything's a variable, then you're just kind of making it up and winging it. So I spend a lot of times, with foundational training, and you know, sometimes you kind of see those videos like we're in a parking lot doing something with no gear, but like you have to start there. You have to start somewhere with some like really basic fundamentals, like, you know, stretch and hose, you know, working length, you know, your layout, you know, all that's how to force a door, how to use the tool. And then we can move on to some more, you know, and then we can put it all together. So man, I've just always been obsessed with how things work, like, you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
mechanically,
Talk
whatever
about
it
it.
is. And so like when you see the trainings and you kind of see me kind of focus in on like focusing on a task, it's such a zoomed in focus. It's just because I'm really passionate and kind of obsessive on like how things work. And I think that's what you're seeing on some of those videos.
I just wrote down a ton of notes because I love how you put it. The variable training is winging it. And what I got from that and what I wrote down was be intentional. Foundational training. Be intentional. They know my next move. That's huge. Like that mindset then allows for everything else is built in because it comes automatic. Then the level of expectation is there because it's intentional, right? And you know my next move because we work systematically this way. Like that type of setup to me is really well done because it then paints a picture of what the expectation is and the delivery of services is consistent.
Yeah, and then also too, if you have that constant, then you know when things are out of place. Like, oh,
Yes. Oh,
that
I
shouldn't fit.
love
And
that.
then you know when to pivot. Like then you'll know. Like, you know, I do, you know, one of my secret passions is like elevator training. Like I don't know what it is, but when it comes to like elevator rescue, I just got this little passion for it. And so I go out with the guys and you know, I got a plan A all the way to plan D, and it's a rhythm. Like this is the way we do it. So if anything goes out of line, then you'll know that we'll be off beat and like something's wrong. And so, you know, anyways, and so I always tell them going into this, like, you know, you may not like it, but this is the rhythm that we're gonna fall. Like when I open the door, I want your hand like this, I want your foot right here. This communication has to happen exactly like this. As I drop down, every time I'm gonna turn on the light and I'm gonna put it in inspection mode. Okay. And then we're gonna have another dialogue and communication. So if all and then we do it over and over and over. And then sometimes if I get distracted, something comes up, they remind me and they get me back on track. Or they could pick up when something's not going normal.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means we may have to make an adjustment. Something's out of place. You could key in and make a decision. So I really love having that rhythm. And then also giving the firefighters some real directions on like, when you see this, do that. Not like just like, well, it all matters and like, well, it all matters on conditions and stuff like that. Like that's garbage. I think like, you know, when you see this, like do that. I like that.
Dude, you have no idea. You are crushing this. I love it. I wrote down when you have constant, you then know when something is out of place. I think that is so smart. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
You're awesome.
And on top of that too, right? It should be said, the other aspect of it too, right, is that you guys are quite remote in the grand scheme of things, right? And so you're not in a major metropolitan area with multiple companies right around you and so on. So your training relies on you guys in the hills and up in remote areas being intentional about your training so that you stay constant and vigilant, right? Like your training is happening. I was at your facility, and to get back to what I opened with how your firehouses are set up, they're very much like open air type fire departments, right? Fire companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the doors are basically always up, and it's like,
Yep.
I don't know if you want to call them lanais or whatever you want to call it, but it's a lot of openness. The air is constantly, I mean, the weather there is absolutely gorgeous. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just, it's open air. So you have your own training ground there too, basically, right? Where you guys are constantly flowing lines, putting hose in the street, and so on. And I want to get into that because the importance of real-time training with being intentional, the quickness. You mentioned quickness before. If it allows you, if you know your job, it allows you to punch up driveways quicker. And if I can search this one quicker, I can get to the next one quicker, which then allows me to get to the next one quicker. So quickness matters, but so does thoroughness, right? And so training matches reality. When I watch you train on some of your social media pages and what you guys do there, it is super intentional and super fast paced. I mean, you guys are moving those lines with speed when I watch, right? And it's intentional, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of the cool thing is since, like you kind of mentioned it, we're a bunch of little fire departments in one large area. And so that was kind of the intention behind the social media was to kind of reach those, those one engine companies that may have, one or two people on them and, they're hungry. Maybe they don't have a culture that supports what we're doing. So that was a way for them to show deliberate training and stuff that they could train on individually or a skill like masking up with your gloves on, like, hey, this is possible, or this is a way to a quick way to throw a ladder or something like that, or deploy a hose, or showing them like how to just kind of give them the idea. Some people have never heard of like water mapping, or or just kind of like where you put your water matters.
Well, so especially for you guys. I mean, water matters to you guys because every drop counts.
That's it. That's really it. So it's like, traditionally, I think, in the early 2000s when I first started here, it was pretty common to start your fire attack from the outside and then come inside because staffing and like a lot of fire attack was driven by vendors. And so you'd see, it'd be common to see a firefighter standing 30 feet back, spraying a fog, an automatic nozzle into a window when we know that stream has no punch, it's empty, it's probably 75 gallons at most, and there's you can sit there for an hour and keep that house going, or you could take your nozzle, get it close, get it steep, get it off the ceiling, open it up and knock the fire, so like how you apply. And I'm not advocating for outside attack, I'm just saying like that's something like that we're starting to learn now, like how to place your water inside, and sometimes those videos that you see is like, you're like, why is that guy doing that? It's like, I'm trying to show like the steepness of the angle, how to start high, take the shape of the box, work it down, wet the floor, give a good wash down, take your time, do it slow. Like there's no reason to, open up quick, shut down and move in and run into the cone. Cause that's a lot of our training was foundational training was that, like, I come from a culture of like the centipede search where you hold on to the boot, you swing the howl again, and then
everybody comes from that. That's ground zero for And
so like the point of the social media was like, once I started, listening to National Fire Radio, getting outside of my comfort zone, going to conferences, it was like, what I want to do is like, hey, maybe I could bring this back in small doses, because one of my lessons I've learned is like passion is great, but it's like fentanyl, right? It's good in small doses, but it could be fatal if done wrong, right? So like my passion, it has to be deliberate. It could be a turn off to some.
Sure.
So I really got to focus on where I fight my battles out now, and the social media pages open that up. And so when I post something like simple, I kind of see the people in my area that like it, but then and honestly it gives me street cred when you got like Jeremy from National Fire Radio, like they like it, and because they look at that like, oh well man, like, and then they go to your page like, well this guy, or the you got Mickey from Top Floor, or or Boogie Down Truck, or these guys, Nick Esposito, and these people that they recognize are these training content people, and they're seeing that like they're given a heart or a like, I don't do it for the likes, but the likes that you guys do it gives it street cred. Like, yeah, this is real stuff that's going on outside your culture, guys. Like, yeah, it's good. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, when you have people, it should be said that it is a closed group, so everybody listening to this episode is not going to be able to follow your page because it's designed for your people and so on. So I should throw that out there because people are going to be like, what's the social media page? Blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? I'm sorry. Yeah. But until Cameron's ready to share it,
sorry,
it's
guys.
private.
It's not intentional.
I get
very
it.
Deliberate of who it's pointed at. Like,
yes.
It's for the people that are on it. Like,
yes.
That's it.
And I should say this, right? Like, you are... God, I keep coming back to it, and it's underlined on my notebook page here. It's intentional. Like intent matters, and it makes a difference. And when you're thorough and systematic in your approach, it becomes intent. And when your intent is good, when your intent is there and designed to make us better, you will win. You will win. And I think what you do is intentional. And even this conversation today, every point that you've brought forth is intentional. And it's obviously the type of individual you are. And I recognize that from the minute we met in our conversations. And I've just absolutely enjoyed our friendship over the last few years. It's unfortunate. I've been trying to get back to Napa, and then much with COVID screwed all that up for me, and so on. But I mean, I can't wait to get back and to see you again and so on, and visit the area, and so forth. But what else excites you, man? I mean, we're going to be wrapping up shortly on this episode. That's how quick these go. But like, what else? Yeah, I mean, we hit on mentorship. We hit on the WUI, right? The Wildland Urban Interface. And I really enjoyed that conversation and that part of this because it's so foreign to me. And I think a lot of people listening are not familiar with it either. So absolutely appreciate how you talked about that. We talked about the intentional delivery of training and what that does. You got anything else that's a hot topic for you? Exciting?
Well, yeah. How much time we got?
Listen, you can have as much time as you want.
One thing I kind of had to go back and reflect on after all these major fires was 2 and 2 out and how it really
hit it, yeah,
to the fire service. And before I get into this, I'm not saying like 2 and 2 out doesn't matter, like it's a good policy, but I think it's been misunderstood. So a lot of these searches and grabs that we were getting was one person taking, like, I'd split my company up, like, you take that house, I'll take this house, and we were doing full-blown searches of pretty well involved houses by ourselves. Like it was in the kind of the understanding, was like, man, like, what about 2 and 2 out? Okay, we just won't say anything because we had a misunderstanding of the intent of 2 and 2 out. So I started doing a deep dive, and obviously I went to all our typical training resources like IFSTA, and I read their explanation of it. So I decided to kind of cruise on over to the actual OSHA website. And if you want to look it up, it's OSHA 1910.134G4. And really what I found is that, this term known rescue does not exist. So known rescue comes from IFSTA. It's nowhere within the language of the OSHA. So I'm going to read this verbatim from their website on OSHA. It says it also does not prohibit firefighters from entering a building or burning structure to perform a rescue operation when there's reasonable belief the victims may be inside. And so that, and they highlighted that. It says when there's a reasonable belief that victims may be inside. So that is the opposite of known rescue. And for me, a known rescue is someone, you see them in the window waving. Like, that's, to me, is a known rescue. Otherwise, like, it's a kind of an unknown. So when there's reasonable belief, now, you could look at all the studies, and I challenge you to tell me a time when it's reasonable to believe that someone's not in their house nowadays. Like, there's, they're occupied 24 hours a day, especially with COVID. 1/3 of the population, works the evening and sleeps during the day. There's really no way, you can't really stand there and say there's a reasonable belief that this home is not occupied, especially at night, especially in a residential set. And this is in a residential setting. So it gives us 2 and 2 out allows us to do searches, is what I'm trying to get at. And then I'll continue to read. It's only when firefighters are engaged in the interior attack of an interior structure fire, the 2 out requirement applies. And they even double down, and they say, there's a bullet point, note 2 to paragraph G. Nothing in this section is meant to preclude firefighters from performing emergency rescue activities before an entire team has been assembled. So what they're trying to say is, like, if you're doing fire attack, you got to have 2 and 2 out, but we're not including looking for people. And so I had to go and like really dive into this. And so I actually went and called Nick Gleiter. He's the area manager for our Cal OSHA. And I kind of gave him our interpretation of 2 out. He was disgusted as the enforcing officer and as a father. He's like, you guys are telling me that you guys really show up to a house and wait until a second unit gets there to go look for people? I was like, yeah. I said, we apply 2 out to every structure fire. And then people say, like, and we say, like, if there's a known rescue or it's in the incipient stage. both of them, you can't tell. Both of those indicators, you can't tell from the outside.
Right.
You can't tell me that there's an incipient stage fire from the outside. You can't tell me that there's a rescue from the outside. So he was shocked. He's like, look, guys, you guys are completely out of line. He's like, this is the intent for the SCBA when interior firefighting started in 1971, whatever it was. This is only focused around the initial attack line or the fire attack line, not your search. Like, you guys are. So, like, that's that's a rabbit hole I've been going down a lot lately. I got tons of information if you're interested. Look, man, I mean, I could talk hours on that, but
No, but I mean, so God, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, because when the two in two out came out years ago, I remember when it first became like a thing, right? And I remember in my area they were like, how are we going to address this? There's going to be times where we don't have sufficient staffing to allow for it at the get and all this stuff. And for you to do some of the homework of what we all assumed, and basically, I mean, there's plenty of times where that rule goes out the window, and we can find plenty of reason why. But to hamper operations or to limit conservation and life, management. I mean, we have a job to do. We have a job to do as firefighters. We're sworn and trained to do so, and we shouldn't allow ill-written policy or falsehoods to drive what we believe should be our norm of operations. And, frankly, I mean, I struggle with that. And the 2 in 2 out is, I understand the concept and I understand the reason why, but man, I'll tell you right now, if there's there's always suspected life hazard in my world. So we're going in,
Yeah. And I really like that they said reasonable belief, because then
reasonable belief. Yeah.
Friend. Yeah. Then I went to talk to my lawyer friend, and he gave me the definition. He says, reasonable and prudent man law, and this is the legal definition. A reasonable man is a term commonly used in criminal law. The standard is used to judge the conduct of an ordinary person only. Usually, persons with greater than average skills or special duties to society are held to a higher standard of care. For example, a firefighter who aids a person in distress is held to a higher standard of care than is an ordinary person. So this is what's going to happen. This is the way I see it. Like, I think a lot of us, the way I was trained, was like, hey, man, like, if I go in there, I'm going to get ripped by the chief, and I'm going to have to explain to the chief why I went inside. And the way it's really playing out now, and you can see it currently in the media this week and last week, is that now you're going to be sitting on the stand with a prosecuting attorney, against the family, say, why didn't you go in?
Yep.
And you can't, 2 in 2 out. Well, it says it's, if there's reasonable belief that someone may be inside. Kamron, like, what was your reasonable belief that nobody was inside? What are you going to say? Oh, there wasn't cars parked out front. There wasn't a light on. There weren't toys in the yard, all that other garbage that we use to kind of, decide whether we're going to go in or not. And like, it's just not going to work out. And they're like, you're going to say, well, it's a 2 in 2 out. So I wouldn't be able to sit on the stand during the prosecuting attorney while there's a grieving family in the courtroom and try to explain why I didn't think it was, occupied. But I guess what people are probably hearing right now, when I'm saying like 2 in 2 out is garbage, that's not what I'm saying. But your decision making on whether you go in or not should not be based on 2 in 2 out. It should be based on your fire conditions, your intakes, the level of your PPE, and your training. Yeah. But 2 in 2 out should not be part of your size up of whether you go in or not. Like, it's not going to be in your favor if you ever had to defend yourself.
I'd like to believe that in my world, every single structure that I'm responding to has a potential life hazard, and it's my duty to make sure that whatever potential life hazard there is, I can try to mitigate that to the best of my ability. And me standing outside waiting for another company to arrive before I can push myself inside because I don't have any of those quote unquote, factors that lead you to believe somebody's home. We find through training all the time, we're like, oh, you pull up in the middle of the night. Yeah, there's certain bedrooms. There's cars in the driveway, blah, blah, blah. You know what? All that's bullshit in this day and age, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we should deem all structures as a life hazard, and we should perform the way we're supposed to as firefighters to make sure that we take care of life and property conservation. And life comes first, and we get our asses in there, and we search that building until we deem it's unoccupied. Plain and simple.
I agree. And, and to think that just because you have one room and rooms going, room extending the point of the room of origin, like, there are places in that house that are completely fine to be in. They're not they don't meet the requirement of incipient stage. So
Agreed.
you may have one room that might be, considered IDLH or beyond the incipient stage, but the rest of rooms behind closed doors, like those are fair game. Like you could be in there with your t-shirt on. Like, let's be honest. Like, so, saying that you can't search searchable space, I think it's a cop out.
I think you're right. I'm sitting here and I'm like, yep, I agree with everything you're saying. And, and frankly, like what we've just talked about over the last hour with the amount of search that you guys perform under crazy conditions. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is right in your wheelhouse. If anybody can speak on this topic, it's a gentleman like yourself or companies like you guys that do this type of work regularly. I mean, you guys are performing, you're understaffed, and not to the department's detriment. It's the situation that you're responding to. I mean, these incidents are well outside a considerable recognition that we have the right amount of resources and people from the get. You just don't. And it's either we're going to work or we're not, and you don't have a choice. And so you got to go to work. And ultimately, like you guys, if anybody can speak to this, it's you guys. And I just think it's a testament to who you are and the passion you have for the job and what you and your guys do daily, man. This has been a fantastic conversation, brother. I am so happy that you took me up on my offer to come on this show, because I think you had so much to share today, and I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this conversation. And don't sell yourself short, pal. You got a lot to talk about, and I think you got a big future ahead of you.
Well, hopefully this probably explains why the guy with the brush jacket has so much passion about search.
I love
like, why you're a wildland guy. Why are you so passionate about search for? It's like, dude, it's like, oh man, come to California.
Well, I want to get back. So, and I want to get back there. I've also heard that we could do press passes too, which would be pretty
Absolutely.
Cool. So that is
anytime.
That is something that I definitely want to look into as time ticks on. We got some opportunities and things we're talking about doing, and that might just be a perfect opportunity for us to get involved and to really shine a light on what you guys do. I think would be a lot of fun, because it would be a different take than your typical, news media press, if you will. And, our focus would truly be on what you guys do and the conditions you operate in. I mean, it's a great opportunity. I'd love to be able to hop on that. So we got to look at that down the road for sure, brother.
Awesome. I hope next time you and Terry and possibly the kids come over, man, we're going to do a big lunch. We're going to do like a shrimp boil. We're going to go big. So give us some heads up, and we're going to.
Well, we are looking
plan on having at least a lunch or dinner with us.
Well, I'll tell you this. We are looking at, I don't have to talk her into it. She's down. It's a matter of talking my kids into it, but I want to do like a 2-week road trip. I want to get one of those Sprinter vans and hit the road. And I want to explore like the Pacific Northwest and areas like that. But obviously you would be on that stop list. So I'm going to take you up on that offer. It's just a matter of when it happens. But I would love to get back out and see you and see the country out there. It's absolutely beautiful. And you're a beautiful human being, man. Kamron, I'm so happy that our paths crossed, and I get to call you a brother and friend. It means the world to me. Amen. So I appreciate you.
My brother. Thank
awesome.
You, Jeremy.
Well, listen, stay right here. I'm going to sign off the podcast, and then I'm going to get right back to you. So hang out, okay? Everyone, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the National Fire Radio podcast. Kamron Gangbin. This guy was a rock star today on this episode. Brings a lot to the table. Cal Fire, the West Coast. It's a whole different animal than what I know on the East Coast. And I valued this conversation today and his friendship. Unbelievable guy, bringing a lot to the table. To further the conversation, we'll put his contact information and where you can find him in the narrative of the podcast. And do me a favor, take this conversation that you listened to on the podcast today, take it to the kitchen table and talk about it, because when we talk about the job, we're making the job better. We'll see you at the next one. Thanks for tuning in. Jeremy, National Fire Radio.